Welcome to Dig It, a real estate podcast by Hubbell Realty Company.
So today, my name is Clint Sloss. I'm on the development team at Hubbell, and I have some guests with me here today to talk about affordable housing. I'll start off with Jess here.
Jessica Galvez, I'm the Regional Vice President for Indigo Living.
Very good.
And I'm Matt Hughey. I'm the Outreach and Communications Director for the Polk County Housing Trust Fund.
Woohoo!
Awesome. And Matt, could you talk a little bit more about Polk County Housing Trust Fund, what you guys do, and what your role is a little more?
Sure. So the Polk County Housing Trust Fund is one of 27 local housing trust funds that are proud to serve the state of Iowa, addressing a whole range of local affordable housing needs. Our job is to mostly let the professionals like you guys do the work of proposing developments and figuring out what's going to be built where, but oftentimes there's a gap left over at the end of that development process. And so we're able to distribute funds from Polk County as well as the State Housing Trust Fund to fill that gap and help make projects work. That's one of our key roles. But we also see ourselves as the planning, funding, and advocacy organization for affordable housing in Polk County overall. So there are a lot of needs and concerns that exist out there in the community, and we're constantly trying to learn about how we can better serve the public and make sure everybody has a safe, stable, and affordable place to live.
That's great. Great, yeah. So again, today, kind of our main topic, or kind of the focus, is really talking about affordable housing. You know, what is it? Who does it impact? And what is our role as a development company, as well as service providers and management companies in development and affordable housing development? So, briefly, give me your definition, Matt, of affordable housing, and then Jessica, I'll ask you the same.
So affordable housing, I always say, is kind of a trick question. It's just housing that fits well within your or your family's budget. So typically we say that you shouldn't be spending more than 30% of your gross income on the place that you live. Here in our metro community, though, the challenge of affording a place to live is not necessarily evenly distributed. So there's lots of availability, and we're a fairly low-cost market for a lot of folks. But I kind of point out to people that if you have, say, a household income of under $50,000 a year, the situation you face finding a safe and decent place to live really starts to change. And so there are a lot of working people, seniors, people with disabilities, others in our community who don't maybe enjoy the same range of options that the rest of us expect in the market. And that's where we spend the majority of our time working.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you, Matt. I think, providing safe, affordable, and really that equality in housing, to something that you're seeing in a Waukee or maybe one of the suburbs, bringing it to the more kind of metro saturated communities.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think something that, I guess from our perspective as a company, as Hubbell Realty Company, affordable to us, where we play in that realm is really both, we have products that are market rate that do have some affordability components to it, but we also have those that are strictly income restricted housing for those that are really at the, the very fringes of those that can afford to live in our metro. So those types of people are typically your service workers, service industry, teaching assistants, sometimes, admins and offices, all kinds of different people that just, maybe can't afford to live where they work, and it provides an option for them.
Absolutely. So we talk a lot about caring professions too. So people who are providing childcare, people who are providing senior care in our community. But yeah, shopping, dining, entertainment workers, all sorts of jobs that we depend on every day. Absolutely, yeah. Clint.
Yeah. And so I think, from Hubbell's perspective and Indigo, we've developed since 2010, we've developed over 900 or 750 units in that time throughout about 11 different projects. And I know, Jessica, we manage more than that.
We do. We currently manage about 9,100 units, and out of that 9,100 units, about a little over 1,000 are actually Section 42 LIHTC with some mixed-in programs.
Yep. And mostly in the Des Moines Metro. We have some that are also in Grinnell. We have a project in Grinnell.
Yep.
But mostly in the Des Moines Metro.
Yep.
For our team. And Matt, as far as metro-wide statistics that you see, what are you seeing trends in the last, I guess, decade for affordable housing? Are you seeing a greater need? Are you seeing, what's kind of on the upcoming trends?
What we've seen in the pandemic is that prices of housing did rise pretty dramatically over the last few years. And so that's been a real challenge, as the amount of money left over in the paycheck or in the bank account, say, of low-income people is really tighter than it's ever been. So after that, the saying is the rent eats first for our families who are really operating on a shoestring. And so people are trying to pay that housing cost and have enough left over for their other expenses, whether that's education or healthcare or just putting food on the table, getting access to medication or things of this kind. So we've definitely seen the pinch that people are under get tighter as we've seen rising prices. The rental vacancy rate is down in our region currently. So we need to be continuing to add housing supply really at all levels to keep up with the demand. We're really thrilled. Overall, Des Moines is a growing region. We are a good performer in the Midwest relative to other communities here, but one of the challenges that when you're a growing marketplace for people to come and want to build families and careers, that can really start to stress out your housing market. And, that stress usually falls disproportionately on people who have the fewest resources. And that is a trend we're seeing here.
Yeah. And I think, you touched about COVID and the challenges thereof that we've seen across many industries, but housing in particular. I know, Jess, we talked about how income restricted in particular, there's some challenges with people that maybe had seen increases in their income while those parameters for income restricted were not changed or kind of lagging. And so that maybe it knocked them out of contention or knocked them out of eligibility in some cases.
Yeah, we've been fortunate enough to see, the kind of the income guidelines grow now. So I think we're kind of back on track where we need to be. I don't have any concerns now, at least, but it was a challenge during COVID.
Yeah. And I think, again, Matt, you said earlier, affordable housing is a big tent. There's a lot of different definitions, a lot of different tools. One of the tools that we use primarily is the low-income housing tax credit program. The 9% program, which provides a large amount of the funds needed. And again, you guys have been partners with many, including Hubbell, to help with that gap financing to support those projects. If you could speak a little bit to the difference between affordable for 55 plus and family, there's kind of the lack of understanding, I think, among a lot of people what the difference is and who can live where and how that all
and the need
works. And the need.
Yeah. And so what I want to do first is just address this of what is LIHTC? We talk about these housing tax credits.
People love to speak in acronyms.
We have a lot of, frankly, for us, it's good to be friends and have code words because we just feel more special as housing people.
Yes.
But we want to invite more of our neighbors to the party. And so we'll let them in on a few of the terms today, I guess. The low-income housing tax credit is probably, if you look nationally, responsible for 80 or 90+% of income-restricted apartment development in America today. It really became the big dog in the hunt back in the Reagan administration. The country was kind of at a crossroads. How are we going to develop rental housing stock for low-income folks? Prior to that, through a lot of the HUD-assisted housing that had been developed earlier, the model was to basically qualify a resident and then provide an ongoing rental subsidy for them and provide an income-based rent. And in our communities, those properties that are still in place and still operating under that model are some of the most precious, priceless housing that we have for extremely low-income people. And in our view, we need more of that type of housing today. But the low-income housing tax credit is a different idea. It gives more involvement for the private market, so it's very good at ensuring quality. That's one of the things I love about LIHTC. The projects are well built. They're, unfortunately for you guys, highly regulated projects, so a lot of design and construction standards apply to LIHTC, and that's really because all of the money, so to speak, to make the housing affordable comes up front. And you're provided these tax credits, and then they're basically syndicated out through an investor, and that gives a large amount of money up front that you're able to use to build the building. But it kind of means that you need to build it really well, and you are going to be closely watched for your compliance on every single aspect of how that building operates by not only the government, which is one aspect of compliance, but also your investors in the building who are looking for those tax benefits. So that is now the predominant way that we provide low-income housing. Now, LIHTC buildings, when they're built, can be focused on populations most at need. So there's usually, restricting them for seniors for independent senior living properties is a common, probably the most common choice that's made. And obviously for for our state, as an aging state, having a source of affordable senior housing is really critical. But you can also do other things. You can layer in certain types of project-based vouchers or other sources of funding to serve special needs populations. You can try to carve out some units for people to really focus on accessibility for persons with disabilities, people who are previously unhoused, or things like that. So LIHTC gets stretched in a lot of different directions. Providers like you who have experience serving diverse populations really are very, very important to the region's overall housing picture, but it's complicated what we ask you to do. And it's not really necessarily a very well understood program because of how complicated it is, but it's an extremely important program.
And can I just say thanks to all of you for being here and being willing to talk about this, because everything that you're talking about today is a complicated issue. It's a multifaceted issue. There's a lot of different players on the field, a lot of moving parts.
Absolutely.
That just goes. I just wanted to say that before you even dive in further.
We just, you talk about the pandemic and weathering the pandemic. What I always want people to know too is just it's been a really particularly hard time to build things over the last few years. You're probably aware, as costs have gone kind of kooky and interest rates now have been really kind of crazy. So for folks like you guys that are thinking about bringing a new development to market, sometimes that process of putting together all the funding you need can stretch out for years. And I think it just is, it's a lot harder to build things than sometimes I think we all appreciate. And we really have to stand by our friends who are focused on affordability and make sure we as the public are investing in supporting you guys, because delivering the product that you do is not easy.
Yeah, and you're right. It's a huge partnership between us and local governments and other partners as well to really bring these projects to reality. I think these projects aren't also not just like you build them, you're done, you walk away. These are long-term investments, minimum 15 years, a lot of times even beyond that, as a requirement of the programming, of the funding. And again, that's a further challenge that we are definitely up to the task to do. But it's definitely another challenge to affordable housing.
Matt, from your vantage point, do you see pockets of the city or pockets of the metro or surrounding suburb that have a greater need for affordable housing than others? What do you see?
That's a really good question. Over time, things have evolved in our metro region a little bit, where we did a workforce housing study right before the pandemic that really found that a lot of basically our service-based workforce is more suburban in nature than it used to be. So I think for 10 years ago, we were really looking at focusing a lot of this type of development on the downtown, on the urban core. That's still needed. That's still very important. But I think what we have found is that as communities that are further out, maybe off the end of the DART line, are looking at opening new businesses or offering new services, shopping, dining, entertainment to restaurants, they're having a hard time finding workforce for those businesses. And to me, that's evidence that the need is maybe geographically distributed further out from the center than we used to think of it as being. So that's one trend. But I will tell you that generally speaking, one of the things that is just kind of true in affordable housing is growth is great. We love it when our communities grow, but the more a community is growing, the more struggle it's likely to have with its rental inventory, especially for people who are on a limited price range. That kind of makes sense. When the supply tightens, people with less resources are affected by that. So if you look at communities that are growing really fast, like Waukee or Pleasant Hill or some of the outlying areas of the metro, it's in those neighborhoods that you see kind of the greatest kind of pressure that's on people from a price standpoint. So y'all bring in properties into those communities that are growing quickly, that are like a LIHTC, that have that lower rent or that lower price point. That's especially valuable when it happens there.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, communities like Waukee and Ankeny as well have both pursued that and are working towards that. In Waukee, they're setting aside land to support affordable housing, which is fantastic. And Waukee is partner with developers up there to do some really great work as well. So, kudos to them for, being thoughtful and looking for those opportunities and really acting on them.
Yeah, and Mayor Courtney Clark is one of the region's great leaders in terms of affordable housing vision. We do see elected officials around in our city councils or city halls really looking and focusing on this issue. So people are thinking, how do I get involved? Well, if you're just concerned out there about everybody in our community having the access to opportunity that we all love about Greater Des Moines, having that conversation with members of city council or with your mayor about what's our community's housing plan? What do we have going on where I live to make sure that we're going to have housing types that are affordable to all the different folks who live here? Just getting involved with them and asking what their critical thinking process is can really open a lot of insights for you in terms of what's going on in your community and what are the ways there are to get involved.
Yeah, no, I think that kind of plays into my next question or conversation is, this another term, another acronym, NIMBYism, not in my backyard.
Yeah.
I think, it's a huge challenge because basically what that means is that, these projects come out to the public and they say, we're going to put this great new project together in this neighborhood. All the neighbors say, whoa, wait a minute. I don't know if I want this. Like, what is this? What are some ways you guys can think of that we could possibly support advocating on behalf of and kind of helping reduce that NIMBYism kind of mentality?
A lot of it is going to be education. I see that stigma, especially around a LIHTC housing, where it's the assumption's automatically made. It's 100% Section 8 or it's 100% HUD subsidized housing, especially in areas of our market that are already saturated with a lot of rental units. They automatically assume that all of those units are actually LIHTC when they're not. So understanding, giving them the education, outreach, trying to spread the word about the actual program and what the program does for so many individuals.
I think another layer of it too is just getting people familiar with what it's like to operate this type of housing, how many inspections by the Iowa Finance Authority or your investor, or how many people are reviewing really every piece of compliance paperwork that comes through one of these properties. There's not a lot that slips by in terms of how this all works. And I just think people need to be familiar with that. We do an exercise sometimes where we'll ask people who own a home, what did you have to fill out in order to qualify for your mortgage? And really, if you look at the amount of paperwork I'm going to collect and how much of it I'm going to verify with third parties,
Absolutely.
If you're trying to get into a low-income housing tax credit apartment, the paperwork burden for you is much greater than it is to often pre-qualify for a mortgage.
Absolutely.
So I just think people need to keep that in mind of how scrutinized these programs are and how much regulation there is in terms of making sure they're built with quality right from the beginning and managed that way.
Absolutely.
So those are a couple of factors that just to, again, give you guys credit for what you're doing, offering this to the community.
Yeah. And I think, something we talked about, Jess, was really being involved and having relationships with local leaders and making sure that they are brought along the way and part of that conversation early on so that they feel they can be advocates for it and they can support it versus it just being kind of sprung upon them.
Yeah.
That's and it's important for any topic, but I think especially for this when you're going to have your constituency coming out of the woodworks to kind of like
give you resistance on it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Clint, another thing I'd point out, you mentioned Waukee. What they did there was they bought 13.6 million acres, 13.6, not million, my goodness, 13.6 acres of greenfield, basically new development land within a mile of Waukee Northwest High School. And what I love most about that is it just shows this is a community that is planning throughout its growth and development process for where is that affordability going to be offered. Because one of the major things that I think can generate that kind of NIMBY response is just when people live in a neighborhood and they've been established there for a few years, they're not always happy to see any kind of change in their neighborhood, no matter what it is. Because people will very quickly kind of settle into the mindset of this is what I invested in. My house is a big investment for me. I want to know that value is stable. So change in general can be kind of hard.
Sure.
So I think the more that we can encourage our communities to really be thinking about that in a strategic and long-term way of like, how are we going to site housing? How are we going to make sure our neighborhoods are developed with affordability built in from the beginning? That helps to make sure that residents, they know what they're getting into from the start. Those expectations are there. There are fewer surprises as the neighborhood kind of evolves and changes over time. So that's why we're so focused on regional planning with housing supply, is just to make sure if you have the focus from the start, it makes it easier for people to understand what's going on around them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, that long-term planning is so important and being able to have it visualized on a map to say, long-term, this is where we're planning to have this and other things as well. But I think that's really a really important piece.
Oh, I love a good awkward silence, you guys. It's because you're just chomping at the bit on who's going next, right? good times, right? I don't know if we can say that, right? I'm wondering, from each of you, as I'm listening, because I can tell you're passionate about it in your own respects and in your own fields. Can you, share maybe a personal story of what really, something that really resonated with you, or a time where you're like, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing in this field? I think, one of you, two of you, all three of you?
I've been personally, given so many opportunities to see, someone move into our community. Maybe they were in, a less than desirable living situation prior, and, 24, 36 months, 3 lease terms, all of a sudden they're purchasing a house. All of a sudden they're in the new car they wanted, or just the quality of life is better. And, it might sound cheesy, but we get a lot of dreams come true, stories out of the communities that we make, the services we've provided for supportive services, things we've done in the community, and the communities we've built within the community, at the actual project site. So lots of good things, come about from what we do. So.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think the leasing office is really where you hear a lot of these stories about how meaningful this is. I used to work for a nonprofit provider of affordable housing and a light tech developer, and you'd hear stories. I mean, frankly, it's in these subtle ways that it shows up. It's like listening to a kid say to their mom who's signing the lease, "Mom, does this mean we won't have to be camping anymore?" Oh. And you realize what that means and where they're probably staying. Right now, for example, the wait list for transitional housing for families experiencing homelessness in our community is at an all-time high, and it was last summer too. Yeah. There's a great need for people to be able to access that safe, stable, and affordable housing. The Des Moines Public Schools estimate that they have hundreds of students who are unhoused, who lack stable housing. Mm-hmm. And so this is a real and urgent issue. And there's really no better feeling that you can get in this business, so to speak, than seeing a family connect with that housing when they just haven't had that access for a long time.
Or hearing someone celebrate, "Is this my room? This is my own room." Mm-hmm, I mean, the impact that, that has is something that, we take for granted for every day, but it makes such a big difference.
I want to tell you how many conversations I just had with people who get in-unit laundry in a newer tax credit building for the first time, and then just the revelation of, I'm not going to have to go out and find quarters in the middle of the night when because the housing is well built and it has these modern amenities, or a lot of light tech buildings these days are pet friendly. That's kind of a trend, and so when people realize that they can have these nicer things that maybe they've just never had that convenience before,
absolutely,
welcoming people to a higher level of housing, it can really, the delight that people express is really moving, and it comes up in these unexpected ways.
And stable housing, I mean, arguably it impacts self-worth, right? When you've got these families who, again, or these seniors who come from less desirable housing situations, and you put them in a unit that has laundry, or they have all of these amenities, or this green space, or it's in a nice neighborhood, all of a sudden, it's the opportunities, they're endless, because they're elevated at that point.
I completely believe that it's the root of self-confidence for a person to have their own place. And I mean, you think about the downsides that people have. I mean, we know people stay in relationships that aren't good for them. They're forced to double up. They're forced to couch surf and constantly move or constantly change schools when they don't have stable housing. And so you see kids sit back in their educational performance. You see, we've seen some really scary situations with seniors who are on a fixed income, just trying to live on Social Security or with modest retirement savings, trying to, dealing with a rent increase, or dealing with, family members, in some cases having, mom and dad need to live with a family when that affordable housing isn't available. It can really kind of put families in some cramped circumstances that just really aren't ideal for anybody. And so having options available so that people can have their own space, and I completely agree with you, kind of decompress and have that relief and that emotional well-being that comes from being in control of the surroundings that you have. I mean, you really can't put a value on that. And we see it every day.
Pre-COVID, we partnered with the YMCA transitional housing, and we moved some of those graduates into a couple of assets that we've managed. And I can't tell you what that meant to them and what it meant to us to be able to, help them continue, to assist on the journey they're on of, independent living and, awesome. Yeah, just awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
What do you guys, as our time kind of winds down a little bit here, I told you it would go fast because it always does. What are some of the, we can either go two ways here in my brain, in my questions. Looking ahead 5 years, where do you hope we are? 5, 10, you put the parameters on it. And or what are some of the resources that we can share here with people so people listening or someone can share just those resources in general?
I think one of the things that we're already seeing some progress with our state LIHTC, our low income housing tax credit program, is really responsive to the development community and the syndicators and all those people involved, and listening to what are some of the challenges we're facing and how can they work with us better to provide the housing in a way that's maybe a little bit faster than it has been in the past, or give us a little more flexibility on certain things. So I think that's in a 5-year trend. I think we're starting to see some improvements there just in the past few years with the way the program has been, the changes that have happened, I think has been really positive.
For me, it's very similar. Anytime one of these developments opens, the rate of leasing and how it fills up is very fast. We know there's continued very strong demand. So, and that's not just at the most affordable level. Look, we are a growing region. We need to be adding housing at all price points. We need to be making housing at all price points easier to build. We've focused on rental housing today, but a lot of the lessons learned could apply to homes that people purchase as well. In the affordable space, providing people that decency does require public investment, and there are smart ways to extend that public investment. So, it's getting toward a majority of states. More seem to be passing every year a state partner to the federal LIHTC program that's able to extend the reach of that even further. We really think it's something. All of Iowa's surrounding states have some kind of program in place like that, except for South Dakota, and we really think it's a conversation that needs to continue up at the State House and look for ways to bring more resources in so that we can extend the impact of this even further.
Absolutely.
I would agree. Having that state partner and then, intentionally strategizing in the different pockets of, Des Moines, the suburbs, and to continue, development that way. So
it'll absolutely take an intentional strategy and many, many, many partners, many hands playing, making a difference. Yeah. Well, is there any other resources or anything, other topics you guys want to touch on before we get into the off the rails section? Seriously, I know we could talk, you three especially could talk about it all day long.
We probably could, yes.
Yeah. For us, if you're interested in learning about housing or the issues that are involved, I always recommend that people just visit pchtf.org. That's the Polk County Housing Trust Fund's website. If you're really looking to be a deep dive type of person, there's a button right there when you get there that just says about housing, and we've got an online kind of reading room with all of the government reports that a person could ever want. And I love that. I always recommend that to people. But if you're just curious about what's available in our community or kind of how the system works, we've got a lot of content on that website that is that local planning information that will give you a front door to getting more involved in this in the community.
And can you look at your own specific community as well? So say you're in a specific suburb or downtown or wherever. Can you look?
Absolutely. So we're partners in a regional planning initiative called Capital Crossroads, which is kind of the region's strategy and visioning process. And we have our own initiative for workforce housing there that's called Here We Grow. So if you visit the website herewegrow.city, we have a resource there called Community Profiles. And so for a lot of metro communities, you can learn more about the housing that's in your community, how much rental, how much owned housing, what's the income profile of residents there, and kind of what's that need out there existing.
Well, and I think that would just be very interesting for people, going back to the NIMBYism comment, going back to you may believe how your community is made up or what your community needs based in your own opinion, but there's some nice statistics out there, some interesting statistics out there, eye-opening and meaningful.
Yeah,
perfect.
Absolutely.
Well, we're going to head into the off the rails question. I know y'all are really thrilled about it.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Here we go.
It's not a hard one. It's actually, I'm very curious to hear what your answers are. So Do you ever sing when you're alone? And when you do, because you know you do, what songs? What's your go-to song?
Sure, I'll go first.
Clint's going to start? Oh, good.
Yes, I do sing to myself because I am a narcissist. But I, honestly, I don't know if it's a specific type of song. It has to be within my range. I have to be able to sing it. Otherwise, I just don't enjoy it.
Or just,
You just don't enjoy it. So.
Don't want to stress out your vocal
Exactly.
cords.
It has to be somewhat, I have to sound somewhat good. Otherwise, I'm like, nah, I'm not going to listen to it.
Is it because someone could be listening?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't know.
How do you hear yourself? Your music's not loud. My music's on full blast. I mean, I couldn't even hear myself. I can't hear myself
yeah.
singing.
Yeah, mine's not as loud, but yeah.
I throw a whole concert from like 6:45 in the morning till about 7:55 when I'm usually pulling in the parking lot. I don't have a specific song though. I mean, I channel surf, or I might plug in my Pandora, or just however my soul feels that day, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, I think it's hard to pick one song because it does. It's very it's mood driven for
mood,
me too.
Yeah, mood. It sometimes I might go a little faster than what I'm supposed to, depending on the song too.
That's
Yeah, happens.
challenge.
It's fine.
It does.
We're not paid for a sponsorship here
No,
on this
we're not.
podcast,
No, but we give a lot of shout outs.
The Spotify day list, it's like this new thing that I'm obsessed with, where it like figures out what music to feed to you at different times of the day, and so you will catch me sometimes. I'm gonna say vibing and not necessarily singing along with that. Right now, it's this really funny situation because I got pegged to do special music at my church on August 4th, which is a week from now. So you'll hear me kind of panically like working through that sometimes, like in the Skywalk or something, just because I'm afraid of embarrassing myself in front of the congregation.
Skywalk has a good echo too.
Yeah, that's right.
Great
I don't know what
echo.
the acoustics
Oh,
are
you gotta
there,
sing in
but
the star.
Yeah, that's
you gotta sing in the
Just
Skywalk, Claire.
those great downtown amenities that we have
right.
that people really love. You just wouldn't know. Come experience downtown DSM and you'll find things, opportunity abounds in the most unexpected places.
A song around every corner. Oh,
Exactly.
I love it. Oh, I love it. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time here. And again, there are a ton of resources. This is not an issue or a topic that will go away. This is going to be an ongoing just discussion that needs to be had across many of our cities and in our country in general. So I really appreciate you taking the time to just scratch the surface, because that's really all we got to do today. But I thank you guys for bringing your expertise and coming on here.
And thank you for focusing on it. Really.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can catch a Dig It, a real estate podcast, wherever you listen and get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, you name it. Or you can see these three beautiful faces on our YouTube channel at Dig It, a real estate podcast. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.